Samurai Nippon, Japan's largest overseas invasion.
Opening.
160,000 soldiers crossed the sea April 1592, Tensho 20. Toyotomi Hideyoshi ordered the largest overseas invasion in Japanese history, his objective the conquest of Ming China. But this ambition would sink into the sea 7 years later, along with 200,000 lives.
But first, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. This helps the algorithm show you more videos perfectly suited to your interests. Chapter 1. Historical background and Hideyoshi's ambition.
In 1590, Toyotomi Hideyoshi achieved the unification of Japan. A man born as a peasant realized the unified nation that Oda Nobunaga had dreamed of. He was 53 years old. Hideyoshi had no more enemies within Japan. With all the daimyo under his command, his annual rice tax revenue was estimated at 20 million, koku equivalent to approximately 3 trillion yen in modern value, representing massive financial power. Against this backdrop of overwhelming wealth and power, Hideyoshi began dreaming an unprecedented dream. The Japanese archipelago alone was not enough. His gaze turned far beyond the sea, Karaira, the invasion of Tang China. Hideyoshi called this grand plan by this name. He would pass through the Korean Peninsula and conquer Beijing, the capital of Ming China. Furthermore, he envisioned bringing even India and the Philippines under his control, an utterly outrageous scheme. According to the Taikoki Chronicles, Hideyoshi told his retainers, "Japan is too small. To demonstrate my military prowess, I must conquer even Tang China and India." Why did Hideyoshi obsess so much over overseas expansion? There were multiple reasons. First, to release domestic discontent. After unification, dissatisfaction grew among warriors, whose combat abilities were underutilized. The Shimazu of Kyushu, the Chosukabe of Shikoku, the Hojo of Kanto. Hideyoshi had forced these former adversaries to surrender, but their retainer groups still possessed fighting strength. Young warriors who had never experienced battle also sought opportunities to distinguish themselves. If this energy turned inward, it would eventually become rebellion against Hideyoshi's regime. Therefore, he would direct that energy outward. This was Hideyoshi's calculation. Second, trade interests. At that time, the Korean Peninsula was a crucial hub for trade routes to Ming China. By controlling it, he could obtain precious goods, like raw silk, ceramics, and books. Furthermore, he could monopolize Nanban trade. The economic benefits were immeasurable for daimyo of that era. Trade income was the source of military power. Hideyoshi had made ports like Nagasaki, Hakata, and Sakai, his direct territories obtaining massive trade revenues. Controlling Korea would further double this income. Third, Hideyoshi's own grandiose self-aggrandizement. Having risen from peasant to ruler of all Japan, he could no longer be satisfied domestically. What he sought was the title of Emperor of the Great Empire, ruling all of Asia. Freud's History of Japan records Hideyoshi's arrogance. Thus, he thought of himself as a god and believed he could rule the world. In 1591, Hideyoshi sent an envoy to King Seonjo of Korea. His demand was clear: lead the way in conquering Ming China. Otherwise, I will destroy Korea. The Korean side naturally refused. Korea was a tributary state of Ming and could not possibly oppose Ming. Furthermore, Hideyoshi's demands were nothing but humiliation for Korea. Korea's reply letter contained condemnation of Hideyoshi. Japan is a barbarian country. It knows not courtesy. Upon receiving this response, Hideyoshi's decision was made. There was no longer any room for negotiation. War. We shall subjugate Korea and attack Ming China.
Chapter 2. Invasion begins and initial rapid advance.
April 13, 1592, from Nagoya Castle in Hizen, present-day Karatsu City, Saga Prefecture, the first wave of Japanese forces set sail. This Nagoya Castle was a military base, specially constructed by Hideyoshi for the Korean invasion. Built through rushed construction, this castle was second in scale only to Osaka Castle, surrounded by encampments of more than 130 daimyo. Total military strength was approximately 160,000. This represented 1.3% of Japan's total population of 12 million at the time. In modern terms, this would be like deploying an army of approximately 1.6 million overseas. Including sailors and laborers, the total mobilized exceeded $200,000 for this great expedition. Hideyoshi ordered daimyo nationwide to build warships. Large and small vessels totaled approximately 9,000 ships. The Seto Inland Sea was filled with warships awaiting departure. The vanguard consisted of powerful figures from Kyushu: Konishi Yukinaga's First Army of 18,000, Kato Kiyomasa's Second Army of 22,000, Kuroda Nagamasa's Third Army of 11,000 they followed. Hideyoshi's orders and headed for Busan on the Korean Peninsula. The fleet crossing the Tsushima Strait stretched to the horizon. The sailors' calls, the sound of waves, and the tense breathing of soldiers. The largest overseas military expedition in history was about to begin April 14th, landing at Busan. The Japanese forces scattered Korean forces with overwhelming firepower. The concentrated volley fire of arquebus troops was a terror the Korean army had never seen before. Japan at that time was the world's largest possessor of firearms. The arquebus tactics established by Oda Nobunaga since the Battle of Nagashino had been inherited by Hideyoshi. The Japanese army possessed approximately $50,000. Arquebus is equivalent to all the firearms in Europe combined at that time. The Korean army, in contrast, relied mainly on bows and arrows and spears. Although they possessed some cannons, they were few in number and inadequately trained. The technological gap was obvious. Busan Castle fell in just one day. The castle commander Jongbal was killed in action, and Korean resistance was virtually non-existent. The subsequent advance was remarkable. April 15, fall of Dongne Castle. April 17, fall of Yangsan Castle. Japanese forces continued their northward advance with devastating momentum. On April 29th, Konishi Yukinaga's First Army captured Cheongju Castle, defeating the main Korean forces. Furthermore, on May 3rd, the capital Hansong present-day Seoul fell in just 20 days from landing. They had captured Korea's capital. This was a rapid advance rarely seen in world military history. King Seonjo abandoned the capital and fled north. The fact that the king had fled shocked Korea. The people fell into despair and looting, and riots broke out in some cities. The Japanese advance did not stop. Kato Kiyomasa's Second Army continued northward through eastern Korea, reaching Hworyong in present-day North Korea by June. This distance is equivalent from Hakodate at Japan's northern tip to Tokyo. Some units crossed the border and invaded Ming territory in present-day northeastern China. At this point, soldiers began feeling anxious. Are we really going to attack Ming China? In just 2 months, they had conquered almost the entire Korean Peninsula. Hideyoshi's Karair seemed to be progressing smoothly at Nagoya Castle. Reports of victory reached Hideyoshi daily. Hideyoshi nodded with satisfaction and issued his next orders. Continue northward, aim for the Ming capital. But this rapid advance harbored a fatal problem.
Chapter 3: Righteous Army Resistance and Supply Route Collapse.
While Japanese forces captured cities one after another, the Korean people rose up. Righteous armies, militia who fought for righteousness, even after regular forces were defeated. Righteous armies conducted guerrilla warfare throughout the region. Taking advantage of local knowledge, they hid in mountainous terrain and forests, ambushing Japanese supply units and severing supply lines. The Righteous Army's tactics were clever. They avoided frontal combat, attacking at night or in bad weather. They would steal food and weapons and immediately disappear. The Japanese army suffered from this invisible enemy. Notably, many righteous armies were composed of monks. Militia units organized by Buddhist temples raised the banner of national protection and resisted fiercely. For them, this was also a religious war. Even when Japanese forces occupied cities, they could not secure supply routes. Korea's roads were narrow and mountainous, and supply units constantly faced the danger of ambush. Food and weapons no longer reached the front lines. Soldiers were forced to forage locally, but righteous army resistance made even this difficult. Hunger and fatigue gnawed at the Japanese army. Even more decisive was defeat at sea. Leading the Korean Navy was Yi Sun-sin. As Left Naval Commander of Jeolla Province, he commanded only 12 warships. But this man would completely destroy Japan's supply lines. The turtle ships commanded by Yi Sun-sin were revolutionary warships. The hull was covered with iron plates, and a dragon's head was attached to the bow. These ships specialized in ramming enemy vessels and attacking with cannons. Japanese warships were designed with land warfare in mind. They carried large numbers of soldiers for boarding tactics. However, this tactic did not work against turtle ships covered with iron plates. May 7, 1592, Battle of Okpo. Yi Sun-sin ambushed a Japanese transport fleet, sinking 26 ships. Japanese losses were catastrophic. Following this victory, the Korean Navy won consecutive battles. The naval battles of Sacheon on May 29th, Dangpo on June 2nd, and Danghangpo on June 5 each time, Japanese fleets suffered devastating losses. Then came July 8th, the Battle of Hansen Island. This would be the decisive defeat. The Japanese side had a fleet of 73 ships led by Wakasaka Yasuharu. Yi Sun-sin opposed with 51 ships. In numbers, Japan appeared superior, but Yi Sun-sin deployed his forces in crane wing formation, encircling the Japanese fleet. Turtle ships charged in, cannons exploded. Japanese warships burned and sank one after another. The battle lasted 5 hours. Result: 59 of Japan's 73 ships were sunk. Wakasaka Yasuharu escaped with only 14 ships, but the maritime supply route was completely severed. While the Japanese army continued winning on land, continuous defeats at sea were fatal. If supplies from the mainland were cut off, the 160,000-strong army would have no choice but to starve. Further compounding matters was Ming China's entry into the war. In July 1592, Ming's Wanli emperor decided to rescue Korea, dispatching reinforcements of 50,000 troops led by Li Rusong. Now the Japanese army had to fight against Ming forces. Said to be the strongest in Asia at that time, Ming forces were formidable. The charging power of their cavalry especially was tremendous, sometimes unstoppable even by arquebuses. Furthermore, Ming forces were equipped with cannons called Tiger Crouching Cannons and excelled at siege warfare. January 1593, Battle of Pyongyang. The 40,000-strong Ming army, led by Li Rusong, besieged Konishi Yukinaga's first army of 15,000. After fierce fighting, Japanese forces were forced to retreat. Furthermore, on January 26, the Battle of Byeokjaegwan. Although the Japanese side won this battle, they were made to realize Ming forces' strength. The conquest of Ming China was now nothing but a pipe dream. The Japanese advance completely stopped. The dream of Ming conquest was now merely an illusion.
Chapter 4. Peace Negotiations and Tragedy of Reinvasion.
In April 1593, Japanese forces withdrew from Hanseong and retreated to southern Korea. Hideyoshi had to acknowledge reality. Conquering Ming China was impossible. Then negotiation was the only option. Through Konishi Yukinaga, Hideyoshi began peace negotiations with Ming China. But these negotiations were doomed from the start. Hideyoshi's 7 demands to Ming China included a Ming princess to become consort to, Japan's emperor, resumption of tally trade, cession of 4 southern Korean provinces, Korean princes sent as hostages to Japan. These were conditions utterly unacceptable. On the other hand, Ming also offered the humiliating proposal of enfeoffing Hideyoshi as King of Japan. Enfeoffment was a system where Ming's emperor appointed kings of surrounding nations. For Hideyoshi, ruler of all Japan, this was unacceptable. Thus, peace negotiations completely stalled. But mediators like Konishi Yukinaga feared that if negotiations broke down, they would be held responsible. They made a terrible decision. They lied to both Hideyoshi and Ming. They reported to Hideyoshi that Ming accepted all demands, and to Ming that Hideyoshi accepted enfeoffment. This would later bring about tragedy. September 1st, 1596. Ming envoys visited Hideyoshi at Fushimi Castle. A splendid procession. Gifts of gold and silver. Hideyoshi received the envoys with satisfaction. But the moment he heard the contents of the imperial edict read by the envoy, Hideyoshi's expression changed. "We enfeoff you as King of Japan." The Ming Emperor was appointing Hideyoshi as king. This meant Hideyoshi becoming a vassal of Ming. Neither the cession of 4 Korean provinces nor the marriage to a Ming princess had materialized. Everything was a lie by Konishi Yukinaga and others. Hideyoshi's fury exploded. He drove away the envoys and reprimanded Konishi Yukinaga and others. Then he issued a terrible order: attack Korea again. This time, destroy Korea and subjugate Ming. In January 1597, Hideyoshi ordered a second Korean invasion, the Keicho Campaign. This time, 140,000 troops were mobilized. But this second invasion became even more tragic than the first. Japanese army morale had declined. Soldiers were exhausted and had lost their reason for fighting. Why must we go to Korea again? Voices of discontent arose. Furthermore, Yi Sun-sin had returned. Yi Sun-sin, who had been dismissed due to slander for a time, once again led the Korean Navy with the Japanese reinvasion. With only 12 warships, Yi Sun-sin confronted a Japanese fleet of 133 ships. September 16, 1597, Battle of Myeongnang. Yi Sun-sin used the tidal currents to repel the Japanese fleet of 133 ships. This battle is called a miracle in naval warfare history. Japanese supplies were cut off yet again. Soldiers on the front lines suffered from hunger and cold. The Korean Peninsula in winter was harsh. Soldiers suffering frostbite on hands and feet appeared in succession. Then on August 18, 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi died at Fushimi Castle, age 62. With Hideyoshi's death, the cause for war was completely lost. The Council of Five Elders Tokugawa Ieyasu, Maeda Toshie, Mori Terumoto, Uesugi Kagekatsu, Ukida Hide immediately held a council and decided on complete withdrawal. In November, Japanese forces began complete withdrawal from the Korean Peninsula. But even in the withdrawal, much blood was shed. Yi Sun-sin pursued Japanese forces to the end. November 19th, Battle of Noryang. The combined Korean-Ming Navy of 500 ships attacked the Japanese withdrawal fleet of 500 ships. After fierce fighting, Japan lost 200 ships, but in this battle, Yi Sun-sin also died. Hit by a stray bullet, he died on the battlefield. His final words were said to be, "Do not announce the war situation. Continue the battle." Thus, Hideyoshi's career ended. The 7 years of war left behind only destruction and death.
Chapter 5. Historical Significance and Lessons for Modern Times.
The lives lost in this war are estimated at over 50,000 on the Japanese side, over 1 million on the Korean side, and tens of thousands on the Ming side. Combined, over 1.5 million people may have been sacrificed. Korea's land was devastated. Fields were burned, villages destroyed, and population drastically decreased. It is said that it took Korea several decades to recover after the war. For Japan, this war was a massive waste of national funds. The total cost of deployment is estimated at 30,000 kan of silver, approximately 300 billion yen in modern value. This was equivalent to several years of national budget at the time. Furthermore, daimyo, who participated in the deployment, were exhausted, and some went bankrupt. Meanwhile, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who remained in Japan, steadily accumulated power. It is said that Ieyasu was able to seize power at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 because the Korean invasion had weakened the Toyotomi family. Hideyoshi's ambition ironically hastened the Toyotomi family's downfall. For Korea, this war is deeply remembered as the Imjin War. The wounds of this war would cast a long shadow over subsequent Japan-Korea relations. The land was devastated, and much cultural property was lost. Many craftsmen, scholars, and technicians were taken to Japan. The technology they brought to Japan would greatly influence later Japanese culture. Japan's ceramic culture of Arita ware and Satsuma ware developed through the technology of Korean potters taken at this time. This could be called historical irony. For Ming China, this war was also a great burden. Dispatching reinforcements cost enormous amounts, straining state finances. This is also said to be one cause of Ming's later decline. What should we learn from this war? First, the price of ambition. Hideyoshi's grandiose ambition sacrificed hundreds of thousands of lives and ultimately gained nothing. This shows how individual ambition can bring unhappiness to so many people. Second, the importance of supply. No matter how powerful an army, if logistics collapse, it cannot fight. This is a lesson that applies to modern management as well. The importance of supply chains remains unchanged from past to present. Third, diplomatic failure. Hideyoshi's one-sided demands completely destroyed relations with neighboring countries. This illustrates how important mutual understanding and dialogue are in international relations. Fourth, the importance of information. False reports by Konishi Yukinaga and others reignited the war. Without accurate information, correct decisions cannot be made. This, too, is a lesson applicable to modern times. And finally, the futility of war. The 7 years of fighting brought no benefit to Japan, Korea, or Ming. Only destruction, sorrow, and hatred remained. History exists so we can learn from mistakes. Hideyoshi's Korean invasion is a painful historical lesson showing how much unhappiness one person's ambition can bring to many people. We must never forget this history.
Ending?
425 years after Hideyoshi's death, the great Asian empire he dreamed of ultimately remained a phantom. History teaches us what lies at the end of ambition, and it teaches us the preciousness of peace. Please like and subscribe to explore the unknown world of the samurai. Also, tell us in the comments which warring state's history you want to know about next. Samurai Nippon, until next time.